Today we're going to try and make a succulent using Picot stitch for the leaves. I'm hoping it's going to be quite straightforward, but we will see. I've got a couple of different types of felt. They're quite cheap, they're quite stiff. I'm not too worried about the fabric I'm using because the stitches are going to sort of cover the fabric and be the star of the show. Hopefully this one is thick enough. It is going to be placed on this. I had a bit of this felt around from doing like crafts with my son a few years ago, so it's a good way to use it up, hopefully. I've also got a little terracotta pot which had a real succulent in, which unfortunately did not survive. I'm not very good with plants, so I thought actually maybe we could have some greenery in the house, but it's actually all stitching. So this is the first one I'm going to try and make, and we'll see how it goes. So that's what it's going to end up in. I'm going to take the dark fabric, which is going to be the soil, and we're going to just draw around it, which will be our sewing area. This one probably won't be seen. I'm just going to use it in the hoop. Hopefully it'll make it easier to stitch on. So I'm just going to tack this down. Again, hopefully it won't really be seen. If there are areas of the brown that is seen in between the leaves, then I might do some little French knots or just some little seed stitch to sort of break up the brown and make it more textured like soil. Got a hoop I'm going to be working in because even though felt holds its sort of stretch okay, I think it'll just be easier to work in a hoop. Just doing quite a large running stitch, which is just going to be hidden. I just want to hold it in place. You could just use a brown material. You don't have to layer up a top fabric and a bottom fabric. Or more of a sandy colour if you're doing a cactus for the desert. I want it to be quite lifelike, so I've just got some really natural coloured greens here, and I'm going to mix them up slightly. So I might start with a few whole leaves all the same colour, but then I might mix up a lighter one and a darker one to get a slightly two-toned leaf. The question I'm asking myself is, do I start with the picot stitches in the middle and work out, or do I start with them around the edge and work in? I can tell you the answer later probably. I think if I start with a couple on the inside, then that kind of centers it and I can work outwards, and then I can also stop when I feel the plant is big enough. If I do lots of ones around the edge, it could work out that the plant is kind of, well, it could take me forever. But we will see. I think I'm going to start with two small ones in the middle and take it from there. So you could draw them on if you wanted, but I'm just going to do like two opposite each other, and then we'll probably do 5 around there, and then sort of 8 or 9 around there. And then maybe I would quite like to do some quite big ones, if I can, around the edge. I'm setting up my picot stitch here. I've put a needle in. It's quite a long one. What I could actually do with is some of those really long pins with the little bobble on the end, which would help. But I haven't got one of those at the moment, so I'm just using a long needle, which is fine. And I've done a little tutorial on the picot stitch if you want to check that out after this. Now I do want this to be quite chunky, so I'm using 4 strands, but actually if it's too hard I will cut that down to 3 strands because it's quite chunky, but it's a woven stitch, so you're not actually going to be trying to put it through the fabric every time. So we're going to come up on one side of your stitch. This is pretty much in the center of my brown piece of cloth. Go around your needle and down on this side, and that is going to be pretty much the size of the leaf. That's the tip, this is the center. I've not done it too wide or too big. So we're going to just pull through to make sure the stitch is anchored at the bottom, and you can anchor it at the top in the end, but I'm going to leave all my stitches sort of free to hopefully give the sort of leaf effect. So now we're going to come up right next to one side to make our 3rd stitch. You always need an odd number of stitches. So for most of these I'm probably going to go 3, but I might vary the length of them. But I think for some bigger ones at the bottom I might do 5 kind of initial stitches. So we've ended at the top, and now we're just going to start weaving. You don't go back into the cloth at this point, otherwise your stitch will be attached, and I don't want that at the moment. I find weaving is better with the blunt end of the needle, and we're just going to go under, over and under. I gave myself way too much thread, as I usually do. I'm like, oh, weaving takes up a lot of thread, but actually it doesn't take up that much thread. And once you've done, you just push it up with your needle a little bit, because you want these stitches to be quite dense. And then coming back the other way, we're going to go over, under and over, and you're basically just going to alternate with your over unders. It's just weaving like you used to do when you were a kid, but it creates a really nice stitch, and I'm hoping it's going to look a bit like a succulent. I'm just pushing up after each time, but you could do a few rows and then push up. I think with 3 stitches or 3 spokes it's quite easy to remember where you're at with the under over business. I've not tried 5 before. I feel like you might get a bit confused whether you're going under or over, but we will give it a try. Try not to pull the edges in too much, or if you do, keep it consistent all the way down. So I want the leaf to look like it's going out at the bottom, which it should do, but if I pull in this stitch way too much, then it will sort of go out, then in, and then out again, which would look a bit weird. You want your end spokes really covered up, so it's getting a bit tight now, but I can still see them, so I want to do a couple more stitches. Right, let's just sort of arrange these stitches. Can I fit another? I feel like maybe I can fit another one in. Just there we go. There we go. I think that's looking quite nice. I love the contrast of the green with the brown, even though you won't really see much of the brown. So for your last stitch, come down on the side. I was going to go under this stitch, but instead of going fully under it, just go through the fabric and secure on the back as you usually would. You can see on the back there's no leaf shape, it's just the initial stitches. Some red there, I don't know where that's come from. Okay, make sure it's very secure. Then we're going to take the needle out and we have our first stitch. Oh, it's got caught in the felt a little bit, but that's easy enough just to cut those fibres. It's 3D. So I've got enough of this colour left to do another one in the middle, pretty much back to back. That looks good. And then I might start mixing the colours up a little bit. That looks so cute. There we go, that's my second one done. Slightly bigger, slightly different shape. And you can see they just sort of stand up on their own. They're great. I think the bigger they get, the less likely they are to stand up on their own. You can see a little bit of brown in between, but I think that's okay. I might just stitch them together with one stitch. Maybe not necessary. So I'm going to do sort of a similar size, maybe slightly bigger, all the way around here, mixing up the colours a little bit. So I might actually use, so this is the first colour we used, I might do 2 of this and 2 of that because I'm using 4 strands. So see what effect that has, if any. Very subtle I think it'll be, but I think that will work. So I'll show you when I've done a few more. I've clearly underestimated how many stitches I'm going to need, but that's okay. I've managed to get sort of a couple of longer ones, so I'm going to try and keep doing that size now. It's difficult, I've only got one sort of quite long needle, so I'm not going to be able to get it longer than that. But I think length is perhaps a good way to go. I am intrigued to see what a 5-pronged stitch will look like, so I will try a couple, but I think probably we'll just try and do some more this length. These are using the light green and slightly darker greens. You get a little bit of variation there. These are using the mid green, oh sorry, this one's the mid green and the darker green. This one's just plain dark green, so it's a real mix, but it is all blending together. It's a little bit tricky. These are getting in the way a little bit when I'm stitching near them, so you can see I've pulled the threads a little bit, but when I've finished I'll be able to tuck those in no problem. They're sort of taking on their own shape. This one's twisting a little bit, got some pointing that way, some sort of bending over, so I think it is going to look really quite natural and quite plant-like. There is quite a bit more work to do. The good thing about working from inside out is you can stop at any time. You could just have a little sprouting plant that's at the start of its life, or you could have a bigger sort of older plant and take it all the way to the edges, which is what I'm going to try and do, depending on how long it takes. So I found this. It's actually a brooch fascinator. It's not that sharp, but it's sharp enough for what we need, and it just gives me that extra length that my needle wasn't giving me. I'm going to do exactly the same as in pushing it through. We're going to take a wider stance. And we're going to come up, not quite in the centre. These are getting in the way a little bit. That's why some of them are catching. But not too badly. So we're going to come up one side and then wrap again. So before we were just staying at the top. Now we're going to come down, anchor it here. That gives us 4 stitches. Make sure it's pulled through, and then come up on one of the sides of the needle. And wrap around. You'll need to position that middle spoke a little bit. There we go. So you've got 5 clear lines that we're now going to go over and under. And then I'm going to do exactly the same as we've done with the other ones. Just keep pushing it up. But we are going to end up with a wider leaf. Does occasionally get just slightly caught up with the felt, like the fluffiness of the felt surface, so it's not actually sewed into the felt, it's still lying on top, but little fibres of the felt have got caught up. So if you are using a smoother fabric for your base, you won't have that problem. And this will take up a lot of thread. I think because the middle stitch is so small, we're going to have to leave it there. Actually, I might try one more so I can finish on the other side. Under, over the middle stitch. Under this. Right, I believe this is done now. Could have carried on right to the edges, but actually I quite like the contrast of having a bit of the brown showing. I've added a few extra stitches in between some of my stitches, so there's no brown showing in between the leaves, so hopefully they all look like they are part of the same plant. Now we've got to figure out how we get it to stay in our little pot. You don't have to use a pot, you could frame it in a small hoop, and that would sort of look, if you used a brown hoop, that would look like it was in a little terracotta pot anyway. That is my finished succulent. So I trimmed down the square into a smaller circle. Let's see if I can get it out now. And sewed some running stitch around the edges and drew it together with a little bit of padding inside. And then that's it really. Just going to arrange it in there. it should stay put pretty securely. Tucking it down a little bit because usually your soil in your plant pot is a little bit lower than the top of your pot. And then arrange your leaves. The leaves have kind of taken on a life of their own. Some are like pointing in one direction, some are sticking up. It's really lovely to see, you know. I think every one you make, if you make several, would be really different. I would like to make some more. I'd really like to scale it up, but I'm not sure this is the right stitch for it. It might be that we make some with felt, but with some stitching details on. But I would love to have some more homemade plants around my house. And the great thing is you do not have to remember to water them.